Welcome to Better Health Guy Blogcasts, empowering your better health. And now, here's Scott, your Better Health Guy. The content of this show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or medical condition. Nothing in today's discussion is meant to serve as medical advice or as information to facilitate self-treatment. As always, please discuss any potential health-related decisions with your own personal medical authority.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 65 of the Better Health Guy blogcast series. Today's guest is acupuncturist Greg Lee, and the topic of the show is Goodbye Lyme. Greg Lee is the driving force behind the Two Frogs Healing Center and GoodbyeLyme.com. He is a world expert on using Chinese herbs, alternative medicines, and treatments for healing persistent Lyme disease and multiple chronic infections. As a software engineer and manager, he worked on many NASA projects, including Hubble Space Telescope, Goddard Robotics Lab, and the Antarctic Ozone Hole. After struggling with irritable bowel syndrome and burnout, Greg switched careers to pursue a master's degree in acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine. He has successfully treated several hundred people with chronic pain, fibromyalgia, and Lyme disease in his private clinic. In order to develop precise targeted remedies and treatments, Greg uses analytical engineering skills and electrical frequency scans. The scan results are used to program unique treatments, including frequency specific microcurrent, and to develop customized liposomal remedies for killing infections, detoxification, and promoting healing for each patient. His clinic is in a biotechnology facility where he collaborates with other researchers on identifying natural remedies for killing drug-resistant and biofilm infections. He teaches online and live training courses for medical providers on the GoodbyeLyme System for stopping persistent Lyme disease and co-infections. And now, my interview with Greg Lee. I have known Greg Lee for many years now, and having myself come from the high-tech industry and moving into the realm of health and wellness, I found Greg's story of having come from NASA to working with Lyme disease a very interesting one. And I'm excited to learn today about Lyme disease from an actual rocket scientist. So welcome to the show, Greg.
Hi, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you here.
So tell us a little about your transition from NASA to treating Lyme disease. Did you have some health challenge of your own that drew you into working with integrative and alternative health?
I worked in very high pressure environments. I mean, it was most exciting, like projects we'd work on. We'd work with astronauts and they would control robots from space in our lab. And sometimes we'd have projects that would last, 24 hours straight or longer. And it was a very, intense time. And after many years of that, I began to get gut issues and got diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome and tried medications. It didn't really help very much. It made it so I couldn't really think. So it was kind of like my first exposure to like the gut-brain relationship. I didn't know it at the time. And for a while I was struggling a lot because, I'd be in meetings and it's like my bowels are like going to explode. And so what I eventually ended up doing was going to acupuncture to get relief. And about 8 weeks later, my symptoms actually resolved. I was like, woohoo, back.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So your practice now is the Two Frogs Healing Center. And I know people are going to ask, what's the story behind the Two Frogs?
So I live in Maryland, and in Maryland we have tree frogs. And I lived in this house a couple years ago, and there were these like frogs that would crawl in the house. And I was with my oldest daughter in the kitchen one day, and I saw what I thought was a moth, and it was actually a tree frog who crawled in the house. And we're like, oh, I had a tree frog when I was a kid. So we put him in a terrarium, and we fed him flies and other things. And that was Max. And then Max eventually had another one called Peeper. Those were two frogs. And after talking to some colleagues of mine about some like airy fairy names, the one that they most liked was Two Frogs, because you kiss the frog, it turns to a prince, and frogs are cute.
That's awesome. So when you see a new Lyme patient walk into your office, what are the things that you're immediately looking for, thinking about, and kind of exploring in terms of identifying the key issues that led that particular person to becoming chronically ill and remaining chronically ill?
Well, the first thing I do is I kind of get an intuitive hit and kind of check into what it's telling me about the person. If I feel like there's, some complex issues, then I have kind of a sense emotionally and physically that it's going to be a complex case. And then I just kind of go into a state of like asking my highest source, what do I need to help this person with, and try to get insights that way, and then ask for healing for them. And then look at them through different medical systems that I've been trained in, whether it be Western, like biotoxins, Chinese medicine, functional medicine, essential oils, homeopathy, or germ biological homeopathy, and several other ones. So
yeah, you have a really large toolbox, which I think is really fantastic, and certainly something I personally would be drawn to. I think if I had lived on the East Coast, I would have wanted to come see you and get a tune-up. So it's pretty awesome. So you do a lot of surveys. You stay very connected to people that are following your work through social media and so on. I know you recently did a survey that had over 1,000 responses and looked at the top 5 challenges that people with Lyme disease experience. So what are those top 5 challenges?
Well, I really want to thank all those people who responded to the survey, and reading the answers really helped me to understand more deeply like the overwhelming struggles that people are going through, and help me be a better, more compassionate healer and connect with my clients in their biggest challenges. The top 5 challenges will go in reverse order. The 5th one was feelings of isolation. People wrote about, I can't even mention Lyme for fear they'll think I'm a Lyme loony, feeling alone, not being taken seriously, and it being a scary time and really deeply changing people. The 4th one was having multiple symptoms, whether it be pain, neurological issues, emotional problems, fatigue, memory. And so people talked about, not being able to use their body, or having pain on walking, and arthritic issues, dizziness. And the 3rd one was the out-of-pocket costs, just for testing, for treatment, for the do-it-yourself remedies, and also lack of insurance coverage were the most common things that people described. And people talked about spending like hundreds of thousands of dollars on many, many different practitioners. The 2nd one was a need for more sensitive, more accurate testing for Lyme, co-infections, viruses, and helping people to identify, what's causing their symptoms. So many people talked about, I went to my practitioner, your lab looks great, it's not in, you can't find anything wrong, and being referred to specialist to specialist. And also people had these very, heart-wrenching stories about, I was misdiagnosed for over 20 years and the lab tests are so unreliable. And the top one that came out, which was actually a surprise to me, was that people called for over and over again that doctors, medical providers need more education, information, better treatments for Lyme. And a lot of people talked about how the current medical system of partitioning the body and addressing individual infections and symptoms really doesn't work for these chronic infections, and protocols. One size doesn't fit all. People are saying we need much more targeted, individualized treatment. And so Yeah.
I agree with all five of those things. I mean, certainly huge challenges as I went through my Lyme journey as well. And so I think your 1,000 people are right on with those observations and experiences. Talk to us a little bit about Goo syndrome. What is Goo syndrome? How does that overlap with what we might today call chronic Lyme disease? And then what are some of the high-level strategies that you use in treating a patient with Goo syndrome?
So Goo syndrome was originally written about 1900 years ago, and it most likely referred to patients in the Chinese medical literature that had chronic parasitic infections, malaria, viral, like all these bugs were just eating them out, and the traditional remedies, whether it be herbal or acupuncture or other things in Chinese medicine, weren't effective. And they came up with like reasons that why these infections were different and didn't respond to the normal treatments. And one of the main issues that just pops out over and over again is these are toxic infections. And there's many different kinds of toxins that can produce all different constellations of symptoms, which confuse the ordinary practitioner. And they're depleting of the person's vital energy. They create neurological issues, they create emotional issues, and they have these ways of hiding in the body that are very difficult to get them out. And it takes a very unique practitioner that understands these intricacies to help clear out not only the infections, the toxins, the energies of these things. And in some of the writings, they talk about how a person describes their experiences not being themselves anymore, being jumped by a bad spirit, or feeling like, they don't know who they are anymore. And so how that level also needs to be addressed by clearing out the bad spirits of the infection also.
It's really shocking and interesting to me. I mean, I knew a bit about Goo syndrome from taking your course previously, but I hadn't remembered that it was 1900 years ago that they came up with this definition that today sounds exactly like the definition of Lyme disease, right? I mean, it's really amazing. And even kind of surprising to me that toxicity was perceived to be such an issue even back then, and maybe different types of toxins as compared to what we deal with today with environmental toxins. But it's interesting that that's still a very comprehensive definition of the things that we deal with in Lyme disease today, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, not only in how they define these things, but also the strategies, how like modern biotoxin treatments are approaching this to what was being used, over 1,000 years ago.
So what are Goo toxins then in terms of their reference to toxicity? And then this statement is just interesting. So what do they mean by Goo toxins are like oil seeping into flour? You cannot separate them out, because obviously part of your job is to separate them out, right? So what does that mean?
Yes. So part of the challenge with Goo toxins is that back then they would create all these different symptoms, and the standard practitioner of the time would be totally confused by them, and the remedies wouldn't work. So these special Goo practitioners developed this theory of Goo toxins, which they use the analogy of like pancake batter, essentially, because I used to work for Pancake House in high school, and that when you mix all these things together, you can't separate the oil from the flour anymore. It's all mixed, and you need certain complex ways to begin to take those toxins out of a patient that are, almost exactly like the biotoxins that Dr. Shoemaker describes that we see being talked about at now pretty much all the Lyme conferences.
So let's go back to the strategies around Goo syndrome, and just at a very high level, let's do kind of a rapid fire round around your favorite therapeutic tools, how you approach each of them, and then we'll go into more detailed questions as we kind of move forward. So what comes to your mind in terms of rapid fire, reducing toxicity and inflammation? What do you do there?
So I have like several strategies that are like, my go-tos. Probably the first one is microcurrent, frequency specific microcurrent. And what we can do using our electrodermal scan is identify what are the infections that are maybe present, depending on the frequencies that show up, what are the inflammatory compounds, and what are the different kinds of toxins. And based upon that, we can program the microcurrent to say, hey, let's send in these anti-spirochete toxin frequencies, or anti-parasitic, antiviral, antifungal mold, anti-candida into specific tissues. So would it be in the gut or in the blood cells? That's been awesome for many patients. And actually, I've had patients of mine that have been around to many, many different practitioners and still struggling. And one of the things that they say is that has made a big difference is their microcurrent treatment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm assuming you're talking about FSM, or Frequency Specific Microcurrent, from Carolyn McMakin. And I know Dr. Dave O has spoken about that as well and talked about how amazing that's been in his patient population as well.
Yeah, I think the marriage of the scanning and that driving the definition of the microcurrent is key. It's essential.
That's great. All right, so the next strategy: replenishing the blood, the chi, the yin, and the yang.
Oh, I haven't finished with the more.
You're still.
I still got more toxicity tools.
Right.
Okay,
great.
The next one, actually, one of the things that I was surprised about is that a lot of my patients show up as having congested liver and gallbladders. And if you know that anything, your liver is your main detoxification organ. And so one of the things that helps really is liver and gallbladder flushes. Because if your filter is all clogged up and with all these stones and congealed fats and things, I have patients that say immediately after or one or several flushes, they have more energy, they have less toxic symptoms, their brain works better. And that's been surprising, because some of them talk about getting out walnut-sized lumps of whatever it is that's coming out in their flushes. The next thing is cupping and bloodletting, because cupping and bloodletting pulls out very thick congealed blood the way I do it, because we're actually pulling stuff out, and lab tests show that it's high in toxins and inflammatory compounds.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm going to definitely ask you more about that as well. So great. So the FSM, the cupping,
German biological detox remedies, use a lot of those.
Flushes. So do you generally find liver flushes are fairly well tolerated by most of your patients? And are there certain people that you would say don't do it? Like, I generally suggest people do that only working with a practitioner, but do you find people struggle to do those liver gallbladder flushes?
I usually wait until they have a certain level of functionality and energy in their system, because it can be depleting for really weak patients. So I usually build them up first, and then it's like, okay, because they're taking about a half a day to clean out their intestines and their liver and gallbladder. So it can be depleting. Another thing is liposomal remedies that have antitoxic properties, whether they be herbs, essential oils, or supplements.
Awesome.
So like glutathione and things like that.
So give us a few of your high-level replenishing blood, chi, yin, and yang strategies.
So again, microcurrent again comes in because it can replenish and nourish the blood, the chi. It can increase the vitality in like the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, HPA axis, the thyroid cells, the gut. It also helps, zap out the energy draining things and infections. Microparticle liposomal remedies, especially the medicinal mushrooms. There's a classification in Chinese medicine called Jing, or like kidney replenishing herbs like goji berries, Rehmannia, Polygonum, Eleuthero, and also things that help replenish sleep. So different supplements, herbs, and remedies that can help a person, because we know if our patients can sleep, then they're going to get better much quicker.
Beautiful. And how about for managing pain and neurological symptoms and moving those things out?
So I had one patient. He had been to this Lyme doc, one of these very famous ones. And after working with this guy for 6 months, he was told by the Lyme doc, "You're the 2% of the population I can't help." And he was like crushed by that. And he came to me and he said, "I own a business. I can't work. I can't even think." And so one of the early treatments I did was cupping on his head, cupping and bloodletting. And after that, he goes like, "Man, my brain was back for several days, but it's all in the back of my head." And I said, hey, you got too much hair there. So I said, I'll be right back. He went down to the barber shop right down the street, came back bald. He had this like pretty big head. I did 11 cups on his head, drew blood out of all of them, and this thick congealed stuff came out. And afterwards he said, like, my brain was golden for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Microcurrent also for target, because with the scan, we can target what regions of the brain are infected, toxic, inflamed, and then send those antimicrobial, antitoxin, anti-inflammatory frequencies into there, anti-pain relieving frequencies. One of the other things, I just had a patient had a severe jaw infection, and her ENT couldn't do anything, meds weren't working or helping. So there's a treatment called hot needle acupuncture. You actually stick a needle into the area and you put an herb on the end and light it. And at the end of doing that for several rounds with her, she goes like, I don't have any pain. This is the first time I haven't had pain in 3 years. How'd you do that?
Amazing.
So
yeah,
CBD
awesome.
oil, also very good for the cannabinoid receptors and reducing pain. There's several essential oils, especially the mint essential oils for relieving pain. And then also doing them topically, doing them internally, but also putting them in front of a laser has been very effective also.
How do you approach calming the emotions and the spirit?
So again, microcurrent again has emotional calming frequencies.
No, that's great. It's nice to see these common threads come out. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's why I use that on every patient. There's different essential oils that are calming, that help enliven the emotions, like the citrus, myrrh, frankincense, rose. Actually, moxibustion, where you're actually burning that herb not only on the needle but also on the skin, can help relieve difficult, painful emotions. CBD oil again. And then there's this spiritual practice where a person repeats a name or phrase of whatever they call the highest source of healing. It comes from a concept actually in Chinese medicine called Gan, where you are invoking and resonating whatever you call the highest.
Beautiful. How about you talked a little about some of the liposomal remedies, but how about strategies for dealing with the pathogens themselves?
So guess what number one is? Microcurrent.
Awesome.
Because you have anti-spirochete, antifungal, anti-parasitic, antiviral, antibacterial frequencies. And then since many of these pathogens, they're hard to get to, we put these into the microparticle liposomal remedies that, the essential oils, there's a recent study at Hopkins where like cinnamon, clove, oregano helped kill off, the
Lyme persisters,
get through the biofilms. So we use those and other ones that, depending on what pathogens are going after, that are anti-parasitic, antiviral, German biological homeopathics, that are specific for a pathogen, and then also putting the herbs and supplements in that of antimicrobial properties like Andrographis, Artemisia, artemisinin, Smilax, Hotunia, silver, turmeric. So those are our kind of main tools.
So dissolving biofilms, I know that one of the strategies is to use the liposomal remedies because those then get taken into the biofilm. I know essential oils also have the potential to kind of get past some of that issue around biofilm. What are some of the strategies that you use there?
So I think a couple iLads a couple years ago, everyone was talking about biofilms. And, for me, when I started using things like Terminalia tubuli, which is an herb that has anti-pseudomonas biofilm properties, I noticed that patients would have more herxing with that. So part of me is, I'm not so worried about it because most of my remedies are liposomal, but two, I wanted to wait till the patient is strong enough to handle the release. It's kind of like at the pancake house I used to work at, when you went up, after midnight, turn the light on, all the little drips of syrup and sugar, all the bugs come out to feed on them. Cutting out the biofilms, like turning the light on, and all the bugs are then run and scatter. So you open the biofilm, all these bugs and pathogens and toxins go out into the patient, and often they feel worse.
Yep,
so
because the immune system then responds, and you have an inflammatory reaction to the recognition of these things that weren't previously being seen, right?
Yeah, so we want to make sure the patient's strong enough to handle that release. And then we slowly ramp up their remedies, because the liposomals are in liquid form. They can do fibrolytic enzymes, again,
So targeting reservoirs and hiding areas, I'm going to guess there's a place for frequency specific microcurrent here.
You're awesome, man. So again, with the electrodermal scan that we're doing, we look for stealth pathogens, whether that be like a mycoplasma or viral issues, and then we can hopefully narrow down what reservoirs they may be hiding in and send the antimicrobial frequencies, whatever, into the brain, the joints, inside blood cells, under biofilms, and then also making things into the liposomal microparticle form. They, in different studies, penetrate deeper into cells, deeper into organs, deeper under biofilms. And so those have been
repair
awesome.
and restore is always an interesting one because obviously there's a lot that happens over years and years of toxicity and infections in terms of things that we actually do need to fix then, even if the problem itself has been addressed. So how do you approach repairing and restoring the body and the cells?
Well, fortunately, there are microcurrent frequencies for healing damaged tissues, replenishing energy, and somehow bringing the person more energy in their system so they can heal. Because, these chronic infections can be very depleting, so they need to be built up. And there's a lot of liposomal remedies that we use for helping repair damage in the nervous system, on tissues and cells. So that there's a lot of phosphatidylcholine, which cells use to rebuild themselves in the liposomal remedies. And there's minerals and different supplements, depending on what's been depleted. One of my favorites I use a lot is the one called Mitosynergy for helping repair the mitochondria and nourishing that. Because when that's empowered, the mitochondria are, energized, then healing goes much faster.
Yeah, great. I'm going to ask you more about that when we get to the mitochondria piece, because Mitosynergy is the one with the available copper, correct?
Yeah, the copper that's been bonded, chelated to niacin.
Yeah, okay, great. And then how about, in fact, I was thinking I probably need to have a future podcast now with Carolyn McMakin and talk about FSM, because we're kind of like every one of these is FSM, which is really interesting. So how about clearing out bad spirits and invoking divine healing?
So this is in the different Chinese medicine and other healing systems I study. At some point, they talk about how there's bad energies, negative spirits that can affect a person. Doesn't mean a person's possessed by this bad thing. Maybe they just have a energetic residue that they talk about. One of the systems talk about like 4 levels of persons affected by these bad entities. And so one of the things that I teach patients, if they're open to it, is to practice where they're invoking. The Chinese word is gan, where you invoke and resonate with whatever you call the highest. So if a person has a spiritual tradition, then they use a name from that one, whether it be God or Jesus or higher power or whatever tradition they're following, and they invoke and resonate with that. If they don't, then you can use other terms like unconditional love or the universe, or the essence of everything, where that helps them to tap into, receive, and also be clearing out these bad spirits. Also, cupping and bloodletting in different teachings that I've studied will clear these bad spirits out of the body, because they're said one of the places they like is the blood. And when you're pulling out the blood, you're pulling out the bad spirits. Different essential oils, especially the resins, like frankincense, myrrh, coipava, those are also used. And then different resins that aren't in an essential oil form. One of them is called asafoetida, and its nickname is enemy of the devils. And use that. And a lot of patients feel like when that is burned in the treatment room, that they can actually feel it going in and clearing out things. And then I'm also trained in doing different depossession treatments. Should a person be okay with that? I can tell you a story about that.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that you use to augment conventional diagnostics and determine what issues patients are really struggling with. So you talked about the scanning. Tell us a little bit more about some of those tools.
So one of the big issues that patients come in with is that no one can figure me out. I've been to 46 other specialists, 12 different Lyme docs, and I'm still struggling. Something's missing. What is it? So we work in using what's called an elective dermal scan, and they use the same technology. And with that, we're able to scan for over like 400 different infections. We're looking at toxins, we're looking at inflammatory compounds, but also what systems, cells, tissues are most impacted. And then how do we begin to like get a map of like what are the most highest priority issues to deal with? Because that's one I was talking to a doc at ILADS this last time, and she was like, man, when you saw my patient and you said, hey, these are the priorities, that was such great information. Because part of what I got back was, it's like, well, they test positive for this, but is that the most important thing to treat? And having that clarity really helps us to be very targeted and focused and help a person. And like with the GOO syndrome, it may not be killing infections right off. Mm-hmm. It may be that they need more detoxification or reducing hypercoagulation.
Right.
And so based on that scan, that helps us to be more concise and targeted with what we do in terms of treatment remedies.
So for people listening, so this scan is essentially a system of energetic testing to get information from the body that provides the practitioner with some additional insights, along with all of the other things that they do, history taking, physical exam, all of those other kinds of tools as well. Let's talk a little bit more about wet cupping. So how is wet cupping done? And then if someone's interested in doing that, how do they find someone, an acupuncturist nearby that actually does it? It doesn't seem like it's that easy to find acupuncturists that are doing this.
Yeah, it is a challenge because one, it takes a lot of time. Two, it's messy and you have to have biohazard disposal. And it's, many of the acupuncture practitioners are trained in it, but it's just too time consuming and that's not the way they practice. So what I find is that this has been a godsend for so many patients that have trouble detoxifying because, their genetics, they can't methylate properly, or their human leukocyte antigen, HLA genes, and they can't get rid of the mold or Lyme toxins, or they have congestion in their blood, which prevents them from getting stuff out. And so we're actually putting suction cups on the body, usually could be front, back, anywhere except we don't do eyeballs, so no eyeballs. And that suction draws toxins, inflammation to the surface. And after a couple minutes, we take the cup off, we needle and put the cup back on, and through the holes oozes out the blood. And usually when you bloodlet someone who doesn't have a chronic infection, the blood comes out normal. You take the cup off and blood runs everywhere. It's a mess. And with patients that have chronic infections, especially with a lot of biotoxins, when you take the blood off, often the blood will just sit there like a jello blob. It'll be like this congealed, clotted mass that really, at first, like just shocking to the patient. And it just goes to show that there's this hypercoagulation that is very common in these patients. I had a patient who's diagnosed with MS. He's, over 200 pounds, basically is in a wheelchair, he can't use, his body. And I did 26 cups front and back, all drawing out this thick, gloppy blood. And after that treatment, his wife said to me, he could feed himself for the first time in 3 years.
Wow.
That was amazing.
That is.
And he said, I feel like you pulled concrete out of my veins. No wonder I can't get better.
I mean, you mentioned the hypercoagulation piece. So is it actually doing something then to affect biofilms as well? I mean, there's some overlap there, right?
Well, funny you should mention that, because one of my patients, or actually a couple of my patients, when I've done the cupping, I expect dark red stuff to come out. It actually came out as like white mucousy stuff. And I was like, whoa, what is that? Is this like the secret race of aliens I found hiding among the humans or what? And it was really this, like, their other cups are red. So I said, okay, probably not. But it was like this mucousy stuff. I thought it must be the biofilms or something that are in the blood. Because, at the different conferences, I've seen the images like the bloodstream, and you see the wavy fronds, what they call the biofilm.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And it's
exactly.
And it was just such a significant mass of it. I was just like, wow, that's a lot.
So let's talk a little bit about laser. So I know you incorporate cold laser into your practice, and is this primarily to help with detoxification, or is it also supporting the microbial stress?
So when I used to work at NASA, we would shoot laser information on lasers up to satellites all over the world. And so it's kind of like, hey, you encode stuff in there and boom, you can send it over there. And I was working, actually, trained practitioners as part of the training on, when I do a live training on how to use this. And I told these like acupuncturists, doctors, and they were like, this is the hokiest thing ever. This can't work. And I'm like, why would I waste your time and cheat this if I didn't think it would work? And I said, okay, try it on your patients. Let me know what happens. After the workshop, about a week, 2 weeks later, this one acupuncturist in New York, and one Lyme patient, treated for 30 years, doctor, chiropractor, massage therapist, me, nothing, can't even get her shoulder better. 20 minutes of laser, she had an increase in symptoms, and then they went away, haven't returned since then. Sorry, I doubted you. Wow. So one, it's more, I see it more as a way to get things, the remedies deeper into the tissues, especially with chronic, like weak patients who can't take a lot of strong remedies, or Herxheimer's. You can start to use that to get deeper in the tissues, or the chemically sensitive patients, kids that don't like you poking things into their body or taking these nasty or not so flavorful remedies, that it's a way that can be very helpful to getting them better more quickly.
So it's essentially just another way to provide the body with information or frequency that then the body can use to start dealing with whatever the issue is, right?
Yeah. And just based upon what their issue are, then we can select whether it be the homeopathic remedies that are targeted for a pathogen, or anti-inflammatories or antitoxins, or pain-relieving essential oils, and put them in front of the laser and deliver them in.
Beautiful. How about other light therapies? Do you do other types of light therapy in your clinical practice?
So we use LED. We use like a nasal LED that pulses at 10 times a second. And when you pulse it, it gets deeper into the nervous system in the brain. And what happens in different lab studies, that it reduces inflammation, increases cellular ATP energy. And so when it's also pulsed at 10 times a second, it puts the brain in a kind of like an alpha sleep state like mode. So many of my patients, when I do this for them, they'll be like, hello, wake up. And, a lot of the patients that have insomnia due to like their brain being too active, that really helps calm that down, and they can sleep more deeply.
So is that also then creating a shift between sympathetic dominance to move more towards the parasympathetic side of the nervous system and that healing and restoration state?
Well, that appears to be the symptomatic shift that they're making, since they're not like in fight or flight mode as much, and they're able to kind of go into like a relax, repair, and restore kind of mode. Mm-hmm. We also use a 670 nanometer LED. Is actually developed for NASA to grow plants on a space shuttle mission. And there's a doctor in Wisconsin, Dr. Harry Whalen, who used it on joints and joint symptoms, and they would improve. He'd use it on wounds heal twice as fast. He'd use it on rat brain cells that are poisoned, and rat brain cells would survive being poisoned. And I found that I use it on the head a lot. And surprisingly, some patients diagnosed with neurobartonella actually report like a shift, a clearing, an opening in their head, in their neurologic brain fog symptoms that happens fairly rapidly.
So are there any tools in this realm of light that people can then do at home on a regular basis, or are all of these done in the office?
We'll have patients, unfortunately, the 670 nanometer is no longer available, but people can buy a 660 nanometer and use that at home. They will get also the nasal light, because, as I said, a lot of my patients have sleep problems. It helps their brain to calm down, go deeper.
So is that something like the Vi-Light?
Yes, the Vi-Light 810.
Okay, beautiful. So FSM, we talked the frequency specific microcurrent. We kind of got some understanding of how critical that is in your practice. Talk to us a little bit about the concept of the two different currents and how that's critical in this FSM realm.
So basically, you have two currents that are running. The first one is called the A current, has a healing effect. Inhibit toxins, spirochetes, protozoa, parasites, viruses, detoxify, reduce inflammation, promote healing, reduce stones. There's hundreds of these frequencies. And then that's paired with a second one, which is a targeting frequency, where, so we know that there's inflammation in the midbrain or the hippocampus or the basal ganglia, or there's strep in there or Bartonella creating OCD-like symptoms. Well, let's send antimicrobial frequencies, antitoxin, anti-inflammatory frequencies into those areas and see if there's an improvement in their symptoms or an improvement in their scan results on follow-up scans.
So it's very similar to the first frequency being putting a package together to put in the mail, and the second one being the address of where that package is going to go so that it's able to be targeted to a specific destination.
Yeah, that's what I love about it, is that it's so targeted. And, I think all the other, EMF like Rife and other like Pulse Light are great, but I really like this ability to say where do you want to deliver it?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So we talked a little early on about some of the tools used for detox. I want to hear a little bit more about detoxification support. Is this a realm where you use some of the German biological homeopathic medications? How do you support detox? And then do you use things like ionic foot baths or other physics-based tools in support of detox?
So one of the challenges is that almost all of my patients have difficulty detoxing. And especially those that have been under Lyme treatment with antibiotics or other types of antimicrobial treatment. So what we look at is it a genetic issue to detoxing? And then are there different methylation supplements that can help with, bridging the genetic mutation so they can get rid of the ammonia or get rid of or produce more glutathione or, whatever is that missing link, or get the heavy metals out of their nervous system. And then looking also from a functional medicine perspective, is there a congested liver and gallbladder? Is there gut issues that need healing? Because if they can filter more toxins through their liver and eliminate more through their bowels, they're going to get better more quickly. And also from a Chinese medicine perspective, there are many antitoxin herbs that we use that will target specifically endotoxins, enterotoxins. So if we know that there's specific infections that produce those kinds of toxins, mycotoxins, then we will pair those up with a patient.
Any favorite broad spectrum binder detox tools that you use, or herbs or supplements?
So there's one herb called Galla chinensis that has a strong binding affinity and use a lot of charcoal-based supplements. There's one from Systemic Formulas called Bind. And, there's clays we use in different, from different vendors, which kind of just went out my head right now.
So how about the physics side of it? Do you use any of the ionic foot baths or other physics-based detox support tools?
Yeah, we use, when the patient shows that they can respond well to foot baths, and we do that. The laser, detox, we do, cupping and blood and
well, I mean, it's interesting because, and I'll see what your thoughts are, but I had somebody with Lyme this last week that I was talking to, and they said, well, I don't feel like toxicity is an issue for me. And my thought is, I've never seen someone with chronic Lyme for, years of health challenges where toxicity was not an issue. I mean, have you had a chronic Lyme patient where you felt like toxicity was not a factor at all in their condition?
It wasn't their primary issue.
Okay.
That I had one patient treated for, I get a lot of the patients that have been to a lot of other practitioners, treated for years and years. They've done antimicrobials, they've done Buhner, Cowded, Lyme, and Rife, and they're still sick. And this woman came and we did her scan, and her biggest issue at the time of coming in, she had no improvement with any other treatment or remedies, was arsenic. Mm-hmm. And she goes wow, you are the person that has produced the most improvement in my energy, my brain, because I think you nailed it. So, and another woman came in, 3 years, treated several Lyme docs, sick, not much better. Scan came up with tarantula toxins. And I was just never would have guessed that one. I was whoa. And so we treated her with homeopathics to reduce insect toxins, venom toxins, and she got much better.
So it may not be the primary issue, but I'm guessing it as you over time work with your chronic Lyme patients, that some aspect of almost every one of their protocols is something to support detoxification.
Yeah, I would say that's, yeah, probably.
Okay.
But it's not the primary for everybody, but it is for the majority, I would say.
Okay. So let's talk then about the microbial side of this. You've talked about the liposomal remedies. What are, for people listening, what are liposomals? Why are they advantageous? And then what are some of the more common substances that you might make liposomal in support of reducing the microbial burden on the body?
So a liposome is a microparticle that has, it's kind of like those chocolates you have with the thing in the middle, you bite into it and the creamy cherry or whatever it is comes out, or that box I used to see at my aunt's house every Christmas, a Whitman sampler. That was it. You bite the ones with the stuff inside. It's kind of like that. And you put whatever you want inside with the liposome. It could be antimicrobial, it could be anti-inflammatory, antitoxin, nourishing, emotionally calming remedies. And when it's wrapped in this lipid or fat and you ingest it, other people can do it through the other orifices, rectally, vaginally, that when the cells see it, they go, a lipid, a fat, and they take it in. Because it mostly has a lot of phosphatidylcholine, and that's what cells use to rebuild themselves. And it's kind of like a very efficient delivery system, because then whatever's inside goes inside the cell. And so if you have these intracellular toxins, infections, then you can begin to deliver it more effectively into where the issue is.
So it's nice because it doesn't rely on the gut and digestive system in order to absorb those substances that are in the liposome. And because there's a component of biofilm that also is a fat component, that the biofilms actually also can take in these liposomal remedies. And my understanding is they can affect microbes that are inside and protected by biofilm. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I look at it as like a Trojan horse strategy. It's like, the pathogens see this thing and go, hey, look at that piece of food there. Let's eat it. And then you deliver the antimicrobial, antiparasitic, antiviral, essential oil, herb, supplement. Or, if it's toxins, it could be glutathione, it could be turmeric, it could be lavender essential oil, for helping reduce toxins, inflammation. So really, we actually test individual remedies with each person. So how's it, if they don't have these like CBS, SUOX genetic mutations where they can't handle sulfur very well, we test their hands-on. They test well for it or not. And we only use things that people test well for through the scan and also the hands-on testing.
So in terms of antimicrobials that you might make liposomal, are there some common substances that come up fairly consistently for people that you would say those are the things you use the most in terms of making a liposome for a particular person for supporting the microbial stress?
I would say like the Artemisia artemisinin is one of the more commonly used remedies. Hotunia, because I do see a lot of Bartonella infected patients, and along with that, clove essential oil really can produce a strong Herx in Bartonella patients, but it also has anti-Lyme properties and antifungal properties. So, so a lot of if I really want to kick the microbes, then I do the essential oils, because those are the most concentrated, most seem to be power-packed, Herxheimer producing liposomal remedies to deliver.
So it's not just the essential oils themselves, but you're actually making the essential oils liposomal.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so for people listening, this is stuff that really needs to be guided by a practitioner. You don't want to get into this realm of trying to make your own liposomes and not knowing what you're doing, because it can be very, very strong. So make sure you're working with a practitioner. Let's talk about the homeopathic realm again. Do you occasionally use nosodes or homeopathic remedies in support of the microbial issues as well?
All the time. So depending on what toxins, inflammation, infections they have, then we can use like the DesBio series remedies to target the pathogens. They have like these sets, whether it be Pacana or DesBio, of the detoxification kits, or if they have specific.
I have some of that in my water bottle right here.
All right, way to go. And if they have specific toxins from fungal, bacterial, viral. There's a company, Physica Energetics. They have specific toxins to target specific kind of pathogen toxins.
So one of the listeners, in preparing for this show, one of the listeners asked if there's any over-the-counter herbal formulation or product line that you found helpful for patients and use in your practice. I know most of what you do is very custom, but are there any available commercial lines that meet the Greg-Lee seal of approval?
That I've used over the counter. That you can get over the counter. Most of mine are practitioner. You can only get them.
Well, it could be a practitioner line, but anything that's available for people to access, even if it's through their practitioner, versus you do a lot of custom creating for that specific patient. But are there any lines, even if they're practitioner lines, that you feel helpful?
So the main detoxification remedy lines that I use that I buy are the Desbio, the Picana, the Physica, Energetic, Systemic Formulas. Those are kind of like the main ones. Also, there's a zeolite that's been fractionated called Cytodetox that we use, and those are kind of like the primary go-tos.
When it comes to actual herbs, Chinese herbs and things of those of that nature, you generally do that all custom, right? You're not using a specific product line that's already available, it sounds like.
Yeah, because we find that, you have one herb in there that a person reacts to, then that kind of shoots the whole thing. So we want to minimize that as much as possible. So we scan for new herbs and test for individual matches.
Let's talk a little bit about bee venom and dealing with microbial stress as well. So are you still using bee venom in your practice? How do you like to introduce it into the body? And what were your thoughts on some of the recent research that came out from Dr. Eva Shoppe in terms of bee venom?
So I learned about bee venom from Dr. Klinghardt, and since I'm an acupuncturist, I can only do it topically or through different orifices. And I would have patients, actually, they would have very strong reactions, whether it be a physical Herxheimer. And in one case, one patient of mine, was putting on his forehead. He had traumatic memories as a child come up, and they were recurring for a week. So they can be like a real, what I call ass kicker, excuse my French. And it can really produce strong Herxheimer reactions. And especially in this case of this one brilliant college kid. I mean, this kid would open his mouth and be like, I am really not smart compared to you. And he had dropped out of college 4 years earlier because he got bit, infected, and basically he had a Babesia diagnosis in his nervous system from his Lyme doc in New Jersey. And he was a little better after 3 years of antibiotics when he came to me and he says, can you help me? And so, about a couple months into treatment, he's much better, all except one symptom. And that one symptom was he couldn't access his short-term memory. He did memory testing, and the memory testing said, hey, your memories are there, but he couldn't access them. So I thought, we got to break through whatever that is that's blocking you. So he was the first person that snorted bee venom. It's because I figure the best way to get stuff in the brain, you snort it, it goes right in. He had a big Herxheimer reaction, felt like, his head was swelling and like heat. And so when people have like those strong herxes, what we do is cupping and bloodletting on the head. And that pretty much eliminated the herx in about 20 minutes, which is really awesome because a lot of our patients are really concerned about that. And I looked at him like, are you okay to drive? Because he would drive 3.5 hours down, get treatment, and then drive back 3.5 hours. And I'm like, okay, if you're okay, stop, pull over, be safe. And he said, I'm fine. He's like a 20-year-old invincible kind of attitude. Driving home, gets a call from a buddy he hadn't talked to in several years from college, blah, blah, blah. Gets off the phone, calls me up. Hey, I talked to blah, blah, blah. I'm remembering things I haven't remembered in 3 years. Thanks. And so he would get more and more treatment. Herxheimer's would get less and less and less over time. And then eventually he could do the bee venom on his own at home. Now he's studying environmental engineering on the West Coast, not living with his parents and not working in a burger joint.
Yeah, that's amazing. So do you think the primary mechanism in the way you're using it is also from the melatonin and looking at the research paper that was put out by Eva Shoppe recently, it looks like, it's just amazing how how much of a benefit there is in using bee venom against Borrelia.
Yeah, I mean, Klinghardt even talked about that several years ago, but, love Eva's research. So, yeah, and it's just a matter of how do you deliver it into the areas that you need to. Unfortunately, it does tend to break apart liposomes, so I haven't found a way to put it into that form. So that's why I had this, him and other patients, they will snort it to get it into the nervous system, and they'll do it, topically or sometimes rectally if they are targeting other areas of their body. So,
again, for those people listening, not a do-it-yourself at home thing. You need a practitioner to guide you or someone knowledgeable about bee venom, but I do think it has great potential. And I have heard Dr. Klinghardt say many times over the years that he personally benefited greatly from bee venom in his own recovery from Lyme disease. So, I think it can be a great tool. Let's talk a little more about the essential oils. So you talked about, in some cases, taking essential oils and making them liposomal. Do you also use essential oils orally or topically, or are they primarily used in the liposomal formulations?
Whatever way I can get them into the target, I'm not attached to how. However, I have this one patient I was working with. She had neurological issues, and she'd actually had been using essential oils in her, she's an aromatherapist, reflexologist, for many decades, taking them internally and all that. So she had a lot more experience than I did. And I was giving them to her sublingual, and she was like, they're good, but they're not getting in deep enough. So I put them into liposome. She took it, and she goes like, whoa, what was that? And I said, well, what happened? And she goes, I felt like this whole light just shot deep into my brain. And I'm like, well, what's the difference between the sublingual and the liposome? And she goes like, well, the sublingual kind of coats the outside of the cells. And I later heard that the oils tend to like coat cells, not get as penetrate deeply as in, and the liposome just goes bang right in because you have that, that lipid covering that enables it to get deeper in.
Wow.
So, if a lot of my patients actually have sinus infections in their paranasal ethmoid sinuses, biofilms, fibrin, and so what we'll have patients do is initially they may do sublingual essential oils, low dose, that starts to clean that out. It helps them to sleep more deeply. It helps, if they have tonsil, upper respiratory infections, head in their head also.
So when you're doing that primarily for sinuses, are there specific oils that you're commonly using?
So we're testing, over 50 oils individually with each patient. So one of the most common antimicrobial ones are the cloves, cinnamon, thyme, oreganos, and then like there's other ones like eucalyptus, which has a lot of anti-inflammatory, antitoxin properties. Turmeric, also lavender, German chamomile also helps with like a lot of the emotional, like calming those down.
How often do you find parasitic worms and protozoan organisms in your patients? And are there specific things that you do to address the parasite layer?
So I would say there's probably, I would guesstimate about 50-60% of my patients have either protozoa or larger parasites. Mm-hmm. And so they're often one of the first things that need to be treated unless they have severe mold toxicity or severe heavy metals. And so, first is through the scan, where are they? Are they in the gut? Are they also in the liver? And a lot of my interstitial cystitis patients actually have, them going in and out of their bladder, cross-infecting. And so by then knowing that, we can use the microcurrent, target those specific areas with the antiparasite frequencies. We can use the liposomal remedies, orally, rectally, topically, to get into those specific areas to begin to get them out. There's also a lot of herbs that have antiparasitic properties, and also supplements like artemisinin that we use to target them.
With interstitial cystitis, do you find that it's generally protozoa, or do you find that it can be larger parasites as well?
Fungal, Bartonella, E. coli, sometimes larger parasites. Cool. So yeah, it's a mix. Biofilms, definitely.
And then how significant do you think the chronic viruses are in terms of the symptoms that your patients have, and what do you do to address that viral layer?
So there's an interesting thing in that many of the patients that have had antibiotic treatment, or anti-parasitic treatment even, like they killed off the big germs, but inside they have these, what they call the endosymbionts, or the viruses are hiding inside. It's like, hey, oh, wow, you killed off my host. And then they get released. And when we scan them, the patient has like, their Lyme's not that high, but their Epstein-Barr is like through the roof, or their cytomegalovirus, or their, herpes viruses. Like I had a patient recently, he was like having insomnia, couldn't, fatigue. And it was just like, all these things I'm doing, he did Rife, he did, anti-Lyme remedies, all this stuff wasn't working. And the scan came up as he had meningitis from an HHV6, which is a herpes virus. And so we came up with some liposomal remedies. He also got intravenous antiviral therapies. And subsequently, about 4 weeks later, he's like, my emotions are great, sleeping better, back at work.
Wow. Awesome. So it sounds like the viral piece comes up fairly frequently in your chronic Lyme population.
And it's interesting because often with that, there's elevated metals. It's almost like, from what I've heard from other practitioners, there's this covalent bonding that happens with viruses and metals. So often there's, a virus and maybe elevated aluminum or lead or mercury that also shows up. So
that kind of comes back then to the whole terrain theory, right? If we're detoxifying the metals, then there's likely to be less of a viral stress based on what you're suggesting, right?
I hope that's the case, but we give people, the fractionated small particle zeolite to help mop up whether it be biotoxins or metals.
Beautiful. So one of the common complaints people have is fatigue, sometimes extreme fatigue. So in your thought, what is driving the fatigue, and is it primarily related to mitochondrial support, or is it related to something else?
I would say I see more women than men. And it's interesting how like the women from like 20 to 60, they seem to have more mitochondrial issues, and they respond more to more of the mitochondrial remedies like mitosynergy or the CoQ10 or the PQQs remedies that help them at that level. And then there's a significant other portion that have the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid issues that need either some sort of supplementation, detoxifying, clearing out the infections, and often one of the biggest kicks that I see in energy is through the liver and gallbladder flushes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Do you, in using mitosynergy, do you have to consider the potential for copper toxicity beforehand, or is that not an issue because there are essentially two different types of copper?
Yeah, I have patients ask about that because they have had elevated copper, and that in those cases, it has not increased their levels of copper in their blood tests. And we also put it into a liposome to get it more deeply into to help nourish the mitochondria of the nervous system, deeper into the cells.
You're doing fancy stuff, I have to say. What is the role of nitric oxide in biofilm formation? And then how does that concept come into play in terms of your therapeutic program with a client? What are you doing to address that component?
So I think it was one research study, I forget where it was in California. They found that Borrelia uses a nitric oxide pathway to create biofilms. And nitric oxide in the right area is a great antimicrobial because it helps clear out intracellular pathogens. But, it's something that then these pathogens are using to create their shields. So many of our remedies, depending on, what their properties are, can target and reduce intracellular nitric oxide or extracellular, depending on what their issues are. We usually kind of look at that more in hindsight because I'm not that worried about biofilms since most of the remedies are liposomal and they can penetrate without ripping it open and releasing all the toxic schmutz that's in there. So
this is a case, though, where the strategy would be to do something to reduce nitric oxide, right, in terms of its connection to biofilms?
Yes.
Yeah, which is interesting because a lot of people are taking things to increase nitric oxide. And so you kind of wonder, does that potentially then contribute to additional biofilm in those people that also have chronic infection?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like an emerging area of research. And if we could be more targeted with where to increase it, perhaps intracellularly, and how to work with it's because I would think the biofilms would be more extracellular.
Mm-hmm.
So.
How about environmental contributors to people with chronic illness? So mold, for example, is that a common issue that you see in your patients? Do they often have to explore their homework or school environment in order to optimize their healing?
Yeah, we'll look at the different markers that get elevated, the VIP or other, the inflammatory markers that Dr. Shoemaker has
C4A
discovered.
and TGF-beta1 and MMP9 and all of those.
Yep. And with that, we'll also look at what's showing up in their sinuses, because that's often one of the sites where the fungi, they breathe it in and colonizes there. Also the intestines, especially in patients that have had, rounds of antibiotics, killed off the good bacteria. Now that opens up to fungal candida-like infections.
And marcons as well, right?
Yep. Yeah. So that's part of, our diagnosis. Like, is that a burden? How high of a priority is it? Because often you have things in the sinuses, they're going into the brain, they're going downstream into the body. And that often becomes one of the main foci of treatment, is initially working to clear that out so they can sleep better. They are not just congesting their liver and gallbladder or making their cells toxic from the schmutz that's coming out of their sinuses.
Schmutz, I like that technical term there. So as we get to the last few questions before we wrap up, why do some people heal from Lyme when others don't, despite years and years of treatment?
Well, the one thing is, I think, hypercoagulation. That's one of the things that keeps standing out, because I see a lot of patients, they've been to multiple practitioners, multiple protocols, and they're still sick. And when they get the cupping and bloodletting, they often, probably 80% of them, mark a big, significant improvement in their symptoms, whether it be sleep, energy, emotional, gut, strength. And so that's one of the things. Also, it's the hidden toxins that aren't necessarily hard to detect, whether it be like insect toxins or the biotoxin mold toxicity. And another big issue, I think, is the stealth pathogens, or ones that aren't tested for often, like the parasites, roundworms, flukes. Unfortunately, there are some patients like that, like sushi. And I saw this one thing where this guy had this tuna and this worm was in it. So, they can often get them into their nervous system because they put out these little baby microfilaria that can go in the blood and then get into the brain, unfortunately. And that's one of the things that Alan McDonald found was, the parasites with the Lyme inside them in the brain of the MS patients.
Yeah, so I totally agree. I mean, in people dealing with Lyme, I think we have to be very holistic and really cast a really wide net in order to find and address as many of these different factors as possible. If we're just going after Borrelia, Bartonella, and Babesia and not looking at all the other things that you've shared with us in this conversation, it's much more difficult to make progress. Have you seen patients in your clinical practice that also, they had Lyme, but they also had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? And if so, are you aware of any connection between Ehlers-Danlos, POTS, and mast cell activation?
I haven't seen a whole, I know Shoemaker talks about Ehlers-Danlos and like the difficulty with detoxification. I haven't seen that many Ehlers-Danlos patients, but I do see more like mast cell activation patients. Mm-hmm. And what I often find is that they have multiple pathogens that are just making their mast cells go like, putting out the histamines and all the inflammatory compounds. They're just nuts. And they're so inflamed, toxic, hypersensitive that it's almost like, how do you begin to take off the layers in a way that doesn't make them sicker? So that's why microcurrent is often, they just get antitoxin, anti-inflammatory frequencies and no antimicrobial frequencies. And they're getting laser detox, or they're getting cupping and bloodletting, where they're just pulling out this stuff so that their system can start to reduce this huge inflammatory toxic burden, and then hopefully kick in their own innate immune healing abilities.
When someone in your practice either becomes asymptomatic or they're feeling like they're 95% there, do you do certain things long-term to minimize recurrence of symptoms? Do you keep them on antimicrobials, or is there an endpoint to their treatment?
So about 20% of our patients get off all treatment altogether, and they haven't reported relapse in 6 months or longer. So we're like, woohoo, let's celebrate. That's great. There are patients that they will, they'll just take a break because they're just tired. I don't want to take homeopathics. I don't want to take your herbs, even though they taste great, because we actually add stevia to our herbs now. And it's like, oh, it tastes like a herbal latte instead of this. Woo! And even kids will sometimes take it, which is nice. And so, it depends on the person and what we find. Sometimes we'll do a scan to say, like, is there anything left? And say, like, take a break. Or if we come up with stuff in the scan, like some things like monolaurin that can handle, or homeopathics, like homochords, they will do, and maybe some light detox remedies just to maintain their functioning of their immune system and health.
Beautiful. What excites you the most right now? I know that you're always out there looking for new things, constantly researching, constantly collaborating. What has piqued your interest and curiosity at the moment?
So I'm in a biotech research facility where there's all these PhD researchers, viral, biofilm, chronic infection, and they have all these great ideas that a lot of them never make it out of the lab. And I'm kind of like the unusual outlier, because I see patients, I think about, like, how do I take this research stuff and make it helpful for my patients? So one of these researchers used to manage a contract for the Army with this lab in the Soviet Republic of Georgia, or the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, where they would make these viruses that would kill specific infections, bacterial infections like, drug-resistant staph, E. coli, and supposedly they had discovered one for Borrelia.
So is this like a phage, or is
this is a phage?
Phage, okay.
Spelling Phage. I always called it phage, and I got corrected.
Phage. Okay, yeah, phage.
And so, given that we have this researcher here, what we're looking at are how to isolate these phages and then deliver them. There are certain ones that are on the market now for gut infections that are in over-the-counter. So if, the FDA doesn't change their guidelines on this, then we're looking at being able to isolate these for tick-borne infections. The driver, since a lot of this research is not cheap, that, finding funding for doing that. I talked to a venture capitalist in DC who knows, like, what's being funded in the area. I mean, he's like the guy who knows everything. And he goes, like, there's very little biotech funding for what you're doing here. So what we're looking at doing is, if we can't find, VC angel funding, then what we're going to do is look at doing some sort of self-funded effort through social media, whether it be, providing different kinds of devices or things, that we can provide for patients or the public. So we're looking at different strategies for doing that. But we're always interested in talking to.
So if anyone's listening and just happens to have a lot of extra money, feel free to reach out to Greg and potentially help support this project. That would be fantastic. So tell us a little bit about your courses that you do for practitioners, your educational outreach. I know you're also putting some slides together to kind of supplement what we've talked about today. So how can people find you and get more information?
So the slides for this podcast are going to be at GoodbyeLyme, lyme.com/betterhealthguy. And you can just give us your email, and then we'll send them off to you. And if you want to get our newsletter, you can get that too. And so what we do is we're looking at providing as much information that's helpful for our patients in the clinic, and also training as many practitioners, because that was the number one thing that the survey respondents said: we need better training for practitioners. And unfortunately, a lot of the practitioners that are beginning to see their Lyme patients, it's like, I don't know what to do, man. Nothing I'm doing is working. And so what we want to do is teach them kind of like, how do you use remedies like herbs, essential oils? How do you make them into liposomes? How can you help your patients not only kill their infections, but also support their detoxing, strengthen their immune system, and coming back to health? So we do an initial 6-week course, and then we have an online closed Facebook group where people can interact and share case studies or questions to get answers fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I definitely urge practitioners listening to explore that. I did take the 6-week course. It's been a couple of years now, actually. I think it was when you first started offering it. And it goes into a tremendous amount of detail on every one of the areas that we've talked about in this discussion. So if you're a practitioner and you really want to learn how to implement these ideas in your practice, definitely reach out and look at that course, because it's just got fantastic information in it.
That'll be also available at the goodbyelyme.com/betterhealthguy.
Beautiful.
Information on that.
What are some of the key things that Greg Lee does on a daily basis in support of your own health?
So one of the things is definitely invoking the name of the highest, receiving healing, taking care of myself, getting enough sleep. I do make these nutrient-dense smoothies and have those, eat organic, play with the kids, and just do what makes my heart, feel fulfilled and happy and in service.
Well, and that's the beauty, right? What you do every day as part of your work is something that you're very passionate about and is part of your purpose. And so you're working, but at the same time, you're kind of fueling your own self and your own soul in helping other people, which I think is beautiful.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for taking time to be here with us today to share all these great tools. I hope people will go and learn more information about what you're doing, take the course, definitely appreciate all that you're doing. It's been great to know you over the past many years, and I continue to look forward to connecting again soon and learning more from what you're doing. So thanks so much, Greg, for being here.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Be well. To learn more about today's guest, visit GoodbyeLyme.com. That's GoodbyeLyme.com. Thanks for your interest in today's show. If you'd like to follow me on Facebook or Twitter, you can find me there as Better Health Guy. To support the show, please visit betterhealthguy.com/donate. If you'd like to be added to my newsletter, visit betterhealthguy.com/newsletters. And this and other shows can be found on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify.
Thanks for listening to this Better Health Guy blogcast with Scott, your Better Health Guy. To check out additional shows and learn more about Scott's personal journey to better health, please visit betterhealthguy.com.